Draft prospect rankings. Sean's favorite game, What's More Likely, is back. And did Colin Coward really say the Raptors are the worst champion of the last 7 years?
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It's your favorite part of the day. Thanks for making Locked On Raptors your first listen every day. I'm Vivek Jacob. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors for 8 seasons across several outlets. You can follow Locked On Raptors on X, Instagram, and YouTube. And be sure to check out the Locked On Raptors Discord, where you can talk all things basketball, but especially the Raptors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. On this Tuesday, June the 24th, I am joined by a very special guest and friend of the program. You know him from the Hello and Welcome podcast, the Reaction Pod King, William Liu. What's going on, brother?
What up, Big V? What up, Big V? What are we here to talk about, man? United's chances next year, Champions League. Oh, what's up, man? What's up?
Oh, man. We coming in hot.
Yeah, it's hot. It's hot in Toronto, man. It's hot in Toronto. I got the AC on. I got the fan on. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I mean, it's going to be tough for United again this season, but it's going to be hard to do worse than like 16th.
You know, United was bad because they gave Tottenham their first title.
Oh, man.
Sorry, it's been a while, man.
Down bad right now. Bad right now. We're going to get into these draft prospects, and looking at number 9, I went over who I have as kind of my top 5 around that number 9 range. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to get your top 5, and then we can kind of go back and forth. So who you got?
Let's do it. So for my 5 right now, and I would say these are in slight order, just based on who I think would fit best, would have the most opportunity here in Toronto. I know that Dan Tolzman gave the same response every time, which is we're going to draft best player available, and I don't think that's like he's lying when he says that. I think it's just like the standard phrase. You would say that regardless. But I do think that some opportunity to actually play, some avenue to get minutes, I think is actually going to be pretty important. Like if you draft a shooting guard to this current team, they're going to have a harder time finding minutes, or you are going to crowd out some of the other prospects that you're already working on, which will necessitate you to make a trade. So I am going to lean more center heavy. I think my top 2 picks have been pretty consistent. I think for me, the only thing is I flipped Derek Queen and Kama just because of I think even watching the playoffs, I think especially players that eventually will be able to succeed, I just didn't see a lot of rim running bigs that had a great level of success on the offensive end in the playoffs versus the bigs who are able to sort of make a play, especially against all the physicality, be able to play in a crowd, be able to sort of run dribble handoffs to take pressures off the other guys. I feel like Derek Queen has a higher chance of doing that. Defensively, clearly, they're very opposites, the 2 prospects, but I think I'll have those 2 as my 1 and 2. I've become more intrigued by Noah Senge, I would say. This would take probably at least 2 years because he is pretty skinny right now. He's got very long legs. His center of gravity is very high. I think he's going to have a lot of the issues that, Chris Boucher had, for example, playing physically as sort of that 4/5. And it's kind of crazy to call him a 4/5, but he's, what did he measure at, like 6'11" without shoes? So where's he going to play? Like maybe he'll play small forward, but he really needs to have some of the perimeter creation skills. He is very raw. Like if we drafted him, I think we need 2 years at least to see him start contributing in a positive way in the rotation. Past that, I honestly don't mind Jakob Jonas. I feel like he doesn't really get much pub at all. I don't even think I've even heard the Raptors remotely connected to Kasparis, but I think that he comes in with a good size, a good frame to play the point guard position, shoots the 3 really well. Already has a lot of his ability to create his own advantages because he has a step back 3, and that creates a lot. And I'm curious to see how that plays in the next level when there's even more space. Physically, I think that he's probably fine. Like I think maybe the long-term outcome for him is like he's not your primary point guard, he's more of a combo guard, but I'm looking at like a Bogdan Bogdanovic kind of style for him. I wouldn't mind that style of player for the Raps. I've liked him a lot. And then probably 5th, I'd probably go with Carter Bryant there. I think that I know that he's probably been linked to the Raps a lot more in terms of just people sort of liking that 3-and-D sort of element that the Raptors don't currently have. But for me, I'm just like, if I'm not, it's not a guarantee for me that the three part is there. And even if you watch the tape defensively, there are a lot of gambles that I'm like, are we sure the D is there as well? But if it does work out, I think he fits what the Raptors need exactly as that 6'7" long wing with long arms, and best case scenario, he could be like an OG trajectory. Although I don't think he's that athletic or that strong yet.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's interesting because I think we can get into a bit of a debate here. I have Carter Bryant actually at number 2 because I actually do believe in the 3-point shot and the defense.
Okay.
I think he's someone who could potentially be like rotation ready by like the second half of the season just because of those tools. And I think it's the other stuff that'll have to come along, like his ability to attack a closeout. Just maybe some of the like. There's pretty much no real shot creation at this point for him. So, but I do like his general instincts as well. Just watching some of the film, like passing, just making reads, and I think he can. I definitely see some of the gambling stuff that you're talking about, but I feel like with good defenders, I would rather see that early and have to scale that back than try to coax that out of them. You know what I mean?
Fair. Yeah.
So I really like him. Number 1, I actually go the other way with the Malawach Queen debate. And so I have Malawach ahead because for me, watching these playoffs, it's like anyone who can't stay on the floor defensively gets exposed pretty quickly.
Sure.
And so I think that's where I have some concerns with Queen. And with Malawach, I feel like that's almost a guarantee that he brings to the table. And like, say his worst case scenario is like Mitchell Robinson, and like say he can actually shoot free throws. Like I think the impact.
Honestly, that's pretty key because I mean Mitchell did really well in the playoffs this year. I gotta say.
So impact wise, I think that was really a really strong playoff performance for Mitchell Robinson. And then again, even when you look at these finals, like the thing that separates Turner and Chet is that ability to space the floor. Obviously, Malawach doesn't have that. But Queen, I think if he had a jumper, I'd be a lot more enticed.
Sure.
And that's where if you go back to like the base of what Turner and Holmgren are, like they're great at protecting the rim.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that's where again it made me lean towards Malawach.
Yeah. So well, let's work backwards. I think look, defensively it's not even close. Like defensively it's not even close. I would say offensively it's also not even close. Like I don't know if you give Malawach even 5 years of development if he reaches the dexterity, the skill, even just the thought process of sort of how Derek Queen will get his offense. It's really advanced. It's like a lot of self creation. And granted, like he's in the self creation zone that is kind of mid range, high post and in. So it's a lot of twos. There's not a lot of threes. He gets to the foul line a lot. That kind of helps the efficiency, but. You especially know that especially players now who get their own in the 2-point range, it's just not nearly as valuable in today's league, and fair enough efficiency wise, unless you're Shea. But I don't know, man. I think the skill level is just like really really strong, and I'm thinking about what Dan said yesterday. We were both in OVO trying to get any sort of hints and information out of Dan, and Dan was very measured in all the answers. And I think there was already one question asked about, would the Raptors, like to take a big at the center position. And, he obviously pointed to, we're going to draft BPA, best player available. And then my follow-up question was just to, okay, fine, maybe you're not going to tell us that, but what kind of skill set do you want if you were to draft a big, considering the modern NBA has changed so much? And the number one thing he said was that they want somebody who can play in the Raptors system. He pointed to Jakob Poeltl right away. He said basically you can run offense through him. You can in the high post, dribble handoffs, things like this. And of course on the defensive end. And then he went on to couch that answer with like a bunch of other caveats. He's like, maybe we want a player like Jakob, like 48 minutes of Jakob, or maybe we want a different player and get. But the first thing he said, I think, was what his true intention was that if the Raptors want to get a big, they want somebody who can run, their system. And I honestly think that like Derek Queen has a much higher chance of doing that as compared to Malawak. Now I think Malawak has so much developmental prospect, ability that I think that you give him time in the pro sort of setting. He is near to basketball, just kind of in general. And there's things that I mean, you can maybe teach a guy to play dribble handoffs a little bit more than maybe let's say teach a guy to have the size to protect the rim. So you can make that kind of argument, but I do think that will take a little bit of time, and there's not too much of demonstrated skill on that front. Even when you look at some of the BAL tape, or even if you look at, especially if you look at Duke, because Duke was largely playing him as a roller. So I think that's more hypothetical. But again, I'd be pretty happy with either those two guys. Carter Bryant, man. Again, like if it all works out, the vision, I totally understand it. But to me, I'm seeing somebody who is almost exclusively getting plays made for him. He like if the Raptors came out of this draft with like Ochai as the ninth pick, would people be thrilled? And right. I feel like that's like the higher end for him almost. Now, of course, he's much bigger than Ochai, which I think really matters defensively. I don't think that it's a coincidence that Ochai had 2 game winners hit on him this year. Especially the one with Tatum. I'm like, he just didn't have enough length to sort of contest. And that's whatever. That's Tatum, bro. He's like one of the best like 10 players in the league. But and Carter will have certainly way more size to do that. But I just don't necessarily like that archetype of wing, because that puts so much more of an emphasis on other players to be able to create and sustain a lot of the offensive load. And honestly, when I look at the Raps, like even long term, there's just not a lot of great offensive initiators. There may be great defenders in the future. I think Mobo already has a great chance of doing that. I think Jamal Shed is first and foremost always going to be a defensive player. Jacoby has some play creation, but I think it's more of a two-way sort of thing with him. So I think that Grady is probably the one prospect the Raptors have right now that's offensively oriented, but we have to see sort of if the Raps won't even want to buy into him long term as a starter. Yeah. And then, so that's why I'm just like another 3-and-D guy. I'm like, I could see it, but you need to believe in him being able to do a third thing in addition to that 3-and-D, and hopefully that's self-creation.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. I think, on the other side of this, I think we can get into more of a center debate, because we will get into, some of the stuff that Tolzman said about centers, and also some of the stuff he said about potentially trading down. I think when you look at, what Tolzman said, my reading of it was like, hey, okay, they've looked at opportunities to trade up because maybe they feel like the guy that they most want won't be around at 9. And then if you aren't going to get that guy, do you really see those other prospects as being worthy of that 9th spot?
Sure.
Right? And then that's where it becomes, okay, you know what, are we better off just trading down? Now, I don't know how much we can buy into what he said about, hey, like there's like 8 guys who are in a similar tier, they might really just like one guy and they're not going to give that away. And so, what he said about those 8 guys and just like liking a whole bunch of players, that's where maybe they look at it and say, okay, you know what, we don't mind actually sliding down to 15 and, now we get a lower contract on a guy we still like. And so I think there is a possibility of them trading down if, 1 or 2 of the players that they really want get selected before. So I do think that is more on the table than taking a center, just because of what they've said as well about like best player available. My preference is for them to take a center, because I think that's just, hey, this is something you need. And then you think about the way we talk about draft picks like down the line, right? And how much of it comes down to fit and opportunity. Yeah. Like you've got this glaring need at center, so why not bring in a center who has potential and will have opportunity. And then, maybe that enhances their development as they go. So even though, Tolzman is saying like, hey, you can't expect much from a center,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of development, that first year is always a challenge. I think the Raptors are still in a place where that's kind of okay. And so if they're coming
Yeah.
in behind Yak, like, let them have some growing pains and let them learn.
Mm-hmm.
And long term, maybe that accelerates the growth.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of did go out of his way to talk about how, like, as you mentioned, like, first year centers almost always struggle, and this is something that you can also address in trades and free agency. Um, I would say that the Raptors have not really done great in terms of addressing the center position in free agency in a while. We've seen this sort of like endless cycle come in and out of just like assorted, unnamed backup centers that have, you know what I mean? Like your average guy that you're signing in free agency is probably Orlando Robinson level. You know what I mean? At the same time, I hear his point because, like, if you were to argue for me, like, if you're going to a playoff series tomorrow and you can either have Clint Capella on your team or current day Kama Malawak, I'd actually have to think about which one will give you more immediate production. The thing is, though, like, we're not just talking about, like, what's going to make the Raptors the most competitive for 2025, 2026. I'm thinking long term. And
Yeah.
the good thing about this year's draft, it feels like, is, like, there's a lot of pretty solid center prospects. And so if they do trade down and ultimately target another center, I'm okay with that. But I do think that unless there's some sort of, like, can't miss wing that you need to sort of, like, try to push your chips in on, I think all things being equal, like, yeah, take a big man, please.
Yeah.
Because they are
So,
surprisingly hard to find. Like,
yeah. So, you just mentioned like, hey, there are like a few centers like further down as well.
mhm.
We've talked about Queen, we've talked about Malawach. Another center I like, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on, is Thomas Sorber. I think he's someone who, uh, again, the defense is there. He's got that 7'6" wingspan. I think he's got really good instincts.
Yeah.
Offensively, again, does not have a jumper. And definitely like Queen is still like levels above him in terms of like the overall package. But I do think there's maybe more to Sorber offensively than Malawach.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that one's interesting. I do think that if we're looking at just like pure defensive prospects, the bigger you are, and like there's nobody bigger in this draft, then I do think that that is a tangible difference. You know what I mean? Like if the primary thing that you do is rim protection, um, I think it is a tangible difference to go from a guy who is like 7'2" to like a guy who is like 6'11". Now, granted, Sorber's arms are really long. I think the things that I really liked about Sorber was like you mentioned, like he was honestly like in terms of blocks and steals, like actually more disruptive than Malawak was. Um, the thing is though, I feel like he was almost always just like in like a too big system almost, and so like there was more of an opportunity for him to come over and rotate. You know what I mean? Like it's sometimes I look at like I'm not even trying to hate, but like how good Cleveland's defense is when you have both Jared Allen and Evan Mobley in there. Jared Allen can be around the rim, rebounding everything, and then Mobley can rotate over from the weak side and collect as many blocks and steals as he wants to because he could usually rotate and just help off of somebody. Versus if you just put Mobley at center at 5, he might be guarding more actions, but he might be a little bit more foul trouble. He'll have to contest for more rebounds, and therefore take away some of his energy to be able to always be rotating over. So, and sort of coming in from the blind side. So I think defensively for me, I think Malawak is better than Sorber, but I think that offensively, I do agree with you that he has a little bit more. The thing is, how much more is a concern because like I don't really necessarily see him as like an above average offensively, an offensive center, I would say. So you're largely drafting him for the defensive element, which I don't mind because again, there's other centers in that range. I think you like Joan Behringer, I think is like starting to pop up a little bit. Certainly he's got great size. He looks like he's a very mobile athlete who's also in that 7 foot range. That could be
Yeah.
interesting. But there's a lot of these kind of like styles of players. Versus there's
Asa
also a
Newell's
lot of
getting some attention too.
yeah. And Newell, I think is gonna be really interesting because like he's noticeably smaller. Like he's more power forward sized. If we go back to like 10 years ago when power forwards existed, but
Yeah.
But again, like you can go completely the other way. Like if your option of if you like what Derek Queen brings you, like I can see maybe even some interest in what Danny Wolf brings you, because like if you're gonna do this trade down sort of opportunity, he's also extremely skilled when it comes to handling the ball, passing, be able to sort of play make, and has more of a shooting profile than Derek Queen. I wouldn't say he's a positive shooter just yet, but he certainly can shoot it much better than Derek Queen can, at least especially from three. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of options at center, which is why I think that, like, especially in the Raptors range, like, don't make things overly complicated. If someone slides, like if Con Knipple slides and he's there at a 9, take him because he's the best shooter in the draft, and you figure it out afterwards with the shooting guards. If Ace Bailey slides, take him because he's
Right.
incredibly talented, and I'll take I will never begrudge you for taking a talent that good. Um, even if Trey Johnson slides, I add another shooting guard to this thing. But if it's not, then yeah, go get one of these many bigs. And honestly, I think we will look back on this draft like there's gonna be, I think, at least like 3 or 4 starting center level players in this year's prospect pool.
Yeah. Uh, 3 or 4. Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. I'm not as high as you on Konkanupo. I will say that. I think
Oh,
he's someone that if he slid, I think I'd pass. I'm I feel like he like some people have made the Austin Reeves comparison, but I feel like still like Reeves is more athletic. I
oh,
think
his handle's so much better too, man. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
So
his self creation is much better than Khan's.
yeah, so I feel like there's a gap there, and I feel like Khan's also just like a bit of a stockier build, so I think
Yeah.
he just was gonna have trouble like creating any kind of separation. Um, but yeah, that's a debate for another day.
Mm.
Coming up in this final segment, we are gonna get into the last 7 champions and how they should rank. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and all of a sudden, any game is a must watch event. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit fanduel.com to get started. And we are back at it to wrap up. Well, Colin Cowherd decided to rank the last 7 NBA champions. Obviously, we're in this parity era, and so we've had 7 different winners in the last 7 years. He went with the 2020 Lakers at number 1, the
Oh,
24
brother.
Celtics number 2,
Oh my god.
the 23 Nuggets at number 3, 22 Warriors number 4, 2021 Bucks number 5, 2025 Thunder number 6,
That makes no
and the
sense.
2019 Raptors dead last.
Uh, Yo, can we invert the list? Because it's kind of nice that way. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Okay, so we are in this era of parity. So there's
Yeah.
clearly not a standout super team. So this isn't exactly like comparing, the KD Warriors to like the 72 win Bulls. I think
Yeah.
like that was a lot spicier, and I think there was so much more room for debate and even just passion and emotion, because you're getting into that sort of like battle of the generations. Like it was, which era was better, the 90s or the 10s or whatever you want
Yeah.
to call those. But we have this parity era, so it is really hard to compare them across the board. A couple of things though, even though there is parity, I think that there are clear examples of teams that have a somewhat level of like longevity that you can even reasonably compare. Um, so the reason for that is, for example, like 2022 Warriors. I really enjoyed watching that run. That was really fun. I especially enjoyed watching Boston go up 2-1 and then ultimately lose the next three. That was beautiful. Steph had some incredible performances in that one. Shouts to Andrew Wiggins. Shouts to the pool party. Honestly, Otto Porter. That scammed the Raptors into giving Otto Porter one last contract. So, Nemanja Bjelica stopping Jason Tatum one-on-one. That was all beautiful. But, man, the Raptors, even if you want to take KD off the list, the Raptors beat a way better team in 2019 of a version of the Warriors than that Warriors team that won. So I don't see how you can rank that Warriors team over the Raptors. I think that's just like, it's
Well, on
just right
top of
there
that,
for you. Yeah.
I would even say, like, 2019, that Sixers team is better than some of these champs.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Like,
that Sixers team would have
yeah,
beaten
they
that Bucks
lost.
team, for example. I'm like the Raptors obviously had beaten the Bucks along the way in 2019. They clearly make a huge upgrade with Drew Holiday in place of Eric Bledsoe. But to me, I would say that the Raps probably would have guarded Drew Holiday similar to the way they guarded Eric Bledsoe. And so if Drew Holiday was going to step up and make 5-6 threes a game, then that probably swings it. But like the way that the Raptors guarded would not have changed. And I do think that fundamentally they had Giannis so thoroughly covered by the end. They kind of solved him as the series went on. That I think the Raptors, especially just based on how much front court defense, when you're talking about you have Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, Serge Ibaka, and Marc Gasol guarding at the back against Giannis, who wants to drive downhill. I'm sorry. And if it's Chris Middleton, I'm not gonna lie. Just don't respect Chris Middleton's ability to attack the Raptors. I think that if you look through the history of it, it just never was in his favor. In fact, I would even argue that Norm outplayed him in many moments that really mattered. So I think I would have the Raps over the 2011 Bucks. That Bucks team was really good.
2021.
2021, yeah, 2021, yeah. So like that team was really good. The ones that I would have above the Raptors, I'm not really sure how they would have done against the Nuggets. I would only say that if you were to design the perfect player to guard a Nikola Jokic, I think you would end up
Marc
as
Gasol.
Marc Gasol. No, I'm serious. Like the size to guard him, the instincts to sort of take away the passing lanes occasionally. Jokic is an all-time great, so I'm thinking Jokic probably still dominates and has great games. But I think Mark would allow them to play at more single coverage, which would probably be the best way to defend against that Nuggets team. That Nuggets team was really good though, so I honestly I think I give the Raptors a slight edge in that one, but I do think the Nuggets offense is a lot better than the Raptors offense, just based on the way they pass and move in space versus the Raptors. If you had to say there's one weakness about 2019 was that they played a lot of ISO ball, and a lot of possessions just came down if Kawhi can dominate, and they do have Aaron Gordon on that side. So
Yeah.
then again, the Clippers just took them. That's a similar Nuggets team, let's say, to 7 games. So we'll have to see about that.
Yeah.
I think
So
bias wise, I give the Raps a slight edge. So I mean, I don't know. 2020 is probably the one. Lakers, that team was really good. And then who else am I missing? Oh, the Thunder team. I think the Thunder team actually is slightly better than the Raps. Not gonna lie.
that's really interesting. Because if I were to put a matchup between the Thunder and that 2019 Raptors team, I think the Raptors win that fairly convincingly.
Okay. Give me the
Because-
case. Give me the case.
Well, so I think the one thing we've seen over the course of the postseason is like they've won in spite of their inexperience. And I think that has been a
Okay.
big factor where I think that, that's part of why they went 7 against the Nuggets. I think that, just the final stage and like not having navigated that before, I think that impacted how the series played out. And like, there's no way they should have lost game 1 to the Pacers. There's no way they should have lost game 1 to the Nuggets. And I think those are opportunities, like when you drop those games,
Yeah.
these other teams would, like, I think, the 22 Warriors, for example, they're that type of team. Like, if they come and get that game 1 on your home floor, like that, they are not throwing away that opportunity, right?
Sure.
And I think you think about how good the 2019 Raptors were as a road team.
We were
Like,
great.
Yeah, I think they would have caused a lot of problems. And I think especially, another weakness the Thunder had was their 3-point shooting, right?
Yep.
Like they had games on their home floor where the role players like found their rhythm, and it's like, when they made shots, it was really tough. And obviously they have great defense. But I do think that, coming up against the 2019 Raptors, I think the Raptors take that fairly convincingly. Like,
Was the 2019 Raptors a great 3-point shooting team though,
I
or
think
did Fred just go kind of nuts for 2 series?
I think they were good enough.
Okay,
I think like when
because
I look at
because
the three
Danny
point
was
threats,
struggling like all 2019, outside of that one game in the finals where he had like 5 threes. But Danny was kind of really struggling. Norm was like,
yeah,
I mean, Norm's a Buck specialist. He's the Buck hunter, so he was great against the Bucks. But the other 3 series, was not
yeah,
particularly strong. Kyle had a broken thumb. I think Kyle was like him and Kawhi were definitely their 2 best 3-point shooters. Um, Pascal at that point was mostly a corner 3-point shooter, rim runner type, and also be able to play in the post. So you're not getting that much from him. Mark, you'd have to beg him to shoot a three,
yeah,
and he had to be wide open. Maybe he would be. So it comes down to whether Fred will shoot it or not. And I think the reason the reason I don't like this matchup in a hypothetical sense is like the amount of Lou Dort and Alex Caruso swarming and physically assaulting Kyle and Fred, which Kyle and Fred were so important to the offense moving for 2019. That like, I mean, I guess one of them would be guarding Kawhi, so take that out of the equation. But just that physicality on defense with those guys, I'm not. It gives me kind of like a real concern. I think part of why the Raptors were able to overcome the Warriors, not just with the injuries in the finals that year, was, man, their point guards could really eat off of Steph Curry. They could eat off of Quinn Cook. They could eat off of almost all those guys. Even Sean Livingston, like at that point he was old, right? So,
yeah,
um, I do really fear the defensive tenacity. Like I think it'll be more similar to the Sixers series in terms of how stagnant the Raptors offense would get. And in that series, it was Kawhi had to be Superman. Can Kawhi be Superman? Absolutely, but they got a Superman of their own in Shea. So
yeah, yeah. I think the other interesting debate for me was 2019 Raptors versus 2024 Celtics. And that's a
yeah,
team that
sure.
that's a team where I look at the 3-point differential and I'm like, man, like how are you going to make up for that? And like they get a lot of threes up, they make a lot of threes. They have, again, this is a team with size, right? Like you talk about the
Sure, real
guards,
size. Yep.
like going up against Derek White, Drew Holiday, and then Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So that was kind of a matchup. And then again, you talk about the matchup with the bigs, like they've got Porzingis and Horford.
Yeah.
And so that was a team I was looking at, and like, man, that would be tough.
Yeah, I think the one thing that 2019 did amazing was lock down the paint. That got them through the first 3 series, right? Against Orlando Orlando was whatever, who cares? But the Sixers were primarily a team that really, went downhill at you with Jimmy Butler, with Ben Simmons, and of course with Joel Embiid. And then you also had the Bucks, which was Giannis. So protecting the paint was first and foremost, and the Raps are amazing at doing that. The Celtics were always a hard matchup for the Raptors. Like even back in those times, it was a hard matchup. Like part of the reason we remember that double block with Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard was that it was like a 1 possession game when that happened in the fourth quarter, like down the stretch, and it was a great play. But like that Celtics team always gave the Raptors problems. I think part of me is a little scarred from the 2020 bubble. When you had Marc Gasol eating his shirt at certain points, when you saw Serge Ibaka get outplayed by Daniel Tice, I would say, in that series. And I think a lot of it is because of the ability for there to be so much spacing on the floor. And I think if you took some of those bigs off the floor for the Raptors, did we have enough wings to sort of supplement that rotation? If you gave me a healthy OG, I think it's fine, because he would be so important in that matchup. But OG wasn't healthy for 2019. And that's where,
Yeah.
even though I don't necessarily like the 2024 Celtics that much, I think that they would still give the Raptors problems. I think ultimately, I don't know.
I think I've got the Raptors third.
I think third is like in the relative terms. I think that's fine. I think especially now when people look at it, they're like, well, look how much talent was on the Raptors in hindsight because of, Fred went on to be an all-star. Pascal went on to be an all-NBA player. Norm went on to be a six-man of the year type. OG went on to be a max player. When people point that out, I think that's totally fair and that's totally right. I would say that 2019, especially because, I've really gone back this year and rewatched a lot of those games. I'm like, oh, the realities of the team at that point was that wasn't, they didn't put it all together just yet. Like, that was still very much a team that was sort of like figuring it out as they went along, because they added Mark like 2 months before the playoffs. They added Kawhi, 8 months before the playoffs. So like,
that's also why we love that 2020 team, right? Like, a lot of those guys took a next step because of that swagger, that confidence they got from winning the title.
Right, and they started moving the ball because Kawhi wasn't running ISO every time. But hey, shouts to Kawhi, man. We needed those ISOs, man. Run more ISOs. It's like saying Shea runs 20 ISOs. It's like, yeah, but come on.
Yeah.
So,
last question.
I don't like this list at all, though. From Colin, man. I don't get it. It feels like star power based more than anything else. It's like, which team had the most stars? Let's rank them in this order. It's like, all right, that's stupid basketball analysis.
So that's a good place to leave it. If you want to carry on our discussion, head on over to Locked On Raptors Discord. Link is in the description. Will, let the people know where they can find you.
Yo, listen to the pod. Hello and welcome. We have Big V on a pretty decent amount, of course, with all the projects. Like, I feel like outside of Alex, I feel like Big V's like at least number 3 in terms of. Well, I got Blake's in there too. Shouts to Blake. All right, fine. Number four on the list of who's most frequently on the projects that I'm on. But man, all love to Sean and his family, of course. Congratulations to them, and let's see what the draft brings us. I think that if we honestly, I know there's a lot of like trade rumors and excitement, and everything like that, but if we just come out of this with a pretty talented young player who can play center for us long term, I think that I'm pretty happy with that, and I think we should all be as well. It's not the big fish that everyone's been rumoring and talking about, but that's gonna be okay with me, man. Let's just be patient here.
Yeah, totally agree. Appreciate you, Will, for coming on. Thank you to the fans for making Locked On Raptors your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the 2025 Locked On NBA Mock Draft, a 5-episode series with the most comprehensive NBA draft analysis from NBA experts to college experts to NBA draft experts. Find the 2025 Locked On NBA Mock Draft on NBA Big Board and Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Yeah, I mean, I think that one's worked out okay, right? Like, you end up with Jacoby. I don't think anyone's getting too excited about Rob Dillingham. So I feel like that aspect of it has worked out okay.